Well, good afternoon, and thank you all for joining us for today's Lunch with the Legislator. I am Eric Harrison, the President and CEO of United Way of Central and Northeastern Connecticut, and we have a great panel of luminaries here today for you. And I'm going to have each of them introduce themselves in just a minute, but I did want to just briefly touch on why we're here today and our conversation on food insecurity. So the United Way Emerging Leaders Society, our young leaders, have taken this particular topic on as an innovative approach to learning and generating ideas, implementing through the ELS case competition. And you're going to hear more about the ELS case competition from our panelists. So we have Alondre and Gianni. They've been played significant leadership roles rather in our community and in the ELS case competition. And we're also joined by a very special guest who's very passionate about food insecurity, and that is Congressman Larson. So I'd like to turn it over to our panelists to just briefly introduce themselves. And Congressman, thank you again for joining us today. We're so appreciative of your time. So if you'd like to just tell us some more about yourself and your constituents in the community, and we'd love to hear from you.
Well, when you talk about food, being one of 8 children, it was a nightly scramble. And fortunately for me, being the oldest boy, I always managed to do pretty good with a fork and a knife. But no, as the congressman from this district and knowing firsthand the problems that so many of our citizens face, I can't thank and commend United Way enough for their efforts, and it's been great to work alongside of Gianni and Alondre as well as we cured a special earmark, etc. All of which is necessary to make sure that that the kids get fed. And thank God we have a champion like Rosa DeLauro, who's the chair of the Appropriations Committee and hails, as you all know, from New Haven, Connecticut, but has just been outstanding, as is the whole delegation. So it's an honor to work with them and with the United Way and to make sure that no child goes hungry.
Thank you again for being with us today, Congressman Larson. I want to turn it over to Gianni, who's been very much involved with our ELS case competition, and he is also the president of Bank of America for Greater Hartford. Joe.
Well, thank you, Eric. I'm honored to be asked to be on this panel, and especially honored to be on the panel with Congressman Larson. We don't get to do this quite often, but I will tell you, during the past couple of years when we had quite the emergency food distribution at Rentschler Field, there were times when I was volunteering there shoulder to shoulder with Congressman Larson, distributing food, mostly to people who hadn't ever used a food bank, never had to access that type of service. So this issue of food insecurity is personal to both of us, and then the other issue that I try to get involved in is helping younger folks in our community who are in leadership positions within their companies, raised to be emerging leaders within the community. So that's why I've engaged with the ELS program, and Alondre and his teammates at Hartford Steam Boiler, both Link and Hunter. They were just phenomenal in the case competition last year. I've served as a judge for 3 years on the case competition. It's just been very rewarding. Michael Goldbas is also on the line that I see, and he also served as a judge and is very engaged in United Way. But so the issue of helping folks, emerge as leaders within our community, as well as food insecurity, it played right into a sweet spot for me. But thank you for having me today, and thank you for convening this conversation.
Thanks again, Joe. I do want to just do a shout out to some of our leadership volunteers who have been involved for many years, and some of whom are on the call today. And that is Michael Goldbas, Rich Tavillari, Donna Collins, Benton Forbes, Charlie Bogan, and Irene Basak. So thank you to all of those leadership volunteers. I do want to turn it over to Alondre now, who is with Hartford Steamboiler. And Alondre, just talk to us more about how you got involved in this and a little bit more about the case competition last year.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alondre Rush. I'm a client operations manager at HSB, which is a specialty insurance company. And that is actually where I was introduced to United Way, to the Emerging Leaders Society, and then also the case competition. And, being a participant on the winning team in 2021, I was able to see firsthand, the need to focus on food insecurity in our communities, but then also the reality of we need to do something about this. And I think if you have hands and you have the ability to do something, but you don't, you're just as guilty as someone who doesn't decide to do anything. And so now, as the chair of the competition, I'm really excited about being able to deliver on our commitment to address this growing and real concern. So I just wanted to thank everyone for having me a part of this conversation. I think the commonality between everyone on this call is that we care enough about this to address it and try to make a difference. And so thank you for allowing me to have a seat.
Thanks again. So food insecurity is not something that's new to Connecticut. It's not something new to United Way. It's something that United Way and our partners have been tackling for many years. And I just want to give some brief facts about how that's been exacerbated during the pandemic. So, before the pandemic, we had 35% of families, about 1 in 3 in our service area, were asset limited, income constrained and employed. So these are families that are employed families. These households are struggling to get by. That percentage was about a third. But now we've seen, since the pandemic, that's been exacerbated and pushing towards 40% or possibly higher as well. And we'll see that more when our next ELS report comes out. And just some other facts I wanted to give about United Way's 211. 41,000 people from our service area called 211 in the last 365 days this past year to inquire about food access, including needing help in buying food, information about food pantries and kitchens. And the city of Hartford, unfortunately, is the most at-risk town in Connecticut for food insecurity. It's rated 169 out of 169 towns in the state. So I just want to turn that over to the Congressman, and I'm hoping that Congressman Larson, you can tell us more about what you've seen in our region and the challenges that families are facing that we may not be aware of.
Well, as you indicated, Erica, the challenge is daunting, and the main thing also is communication. I think we're all pleased that we were able to pass, legislation that allowed us to make sure that we're feeding children, and that is, of course, a tribute to Rosa DeLauro, but also dealing with the reality. Imagine in one of the wealthiest states in the nation and in the capital city, we have kids going hungry, and it's A, immoral, and B, we've got to work across the board, and it's something that government has to share a great deal of responsibility, but it's going to be the efforts of the United Way, church groups, and every organization that we know of to make sure that we're planning for the opportunity to get kids fed and to get them appropriate health care as well. And of course, health and nutrition go hand in hand. Last night we were in Bloomfield talking about a program with Access Health Connecticut, where, and again, Hartford and a number of the hardest to serve individuals, there's more than 40,000 people who could have the opportunity to get free health care and nutritional advice because of legislation that we've enacted, and because of the steps of Governor Lamont and James Michelle, who's heading up, as the executive director of Access Health Connecticut. And what we're finding also that in working with the various church groups and organizations, et cetera, that identifying the group and then making sure that we have the resources to make sure that no child gets left behind or is unfed.
Thank you, Congressman. You know, as we elevate this issue to the community and as we learn, is there anything that we should be aware of in terms of initiatives that your office has been involved in, or particular programs?
Well, specifically, we've been involved in Keep Kids Fed, which was an act that was passed, and we continue to do outreach throughout the district with Mothers United Against Violence, Hartford Communities That Care, and various church organizations to make sure that we're doing our level best to make sure we're getting resources to where they count.
Great, thank you. Joe, I want to turn to you and just get your perspective on United Way's role, in terms of this particular issue, and just get an understanding of why is this, a passion of yours, and why have you been involved so much in this particular ELS case competition?
Well, so as far as United Way serves as a convener, and if I've learned anything from United Way, that if we are going to solve some of these societal issues, we have to do it together, as the Congressman just said, that we have an incredible generosity of individual donors in Connecticut, right, that can contribute to some of these issues, but individual donors alone can't solve this problem. We have a number of foundations in Connecticut, right, which have a tremendous amount of resources. But again, foundations alone won't solve the problem. Not-for-profits are engaged in this, right? But government, I mean, the dollars that we've been getting for the emergency food distribution, the ARPA dollars that are out there, and the earmark that the Congressman talked about, $250,000 for Forge City Works, which is right on Broad Street, bringing a grocery store into an area where there's a food desert. I mean, just tremendous resources. But if we go back to normalized budgets, it's a strain on some of the city budgets, some of the state budgets at times to find the resources to all the problems that exist, not just food insecurity. So and then companies, right? Companies need to be involved. But when you get all of those together, you can start to make an impact on some of these issues. And as I talked about, ELS was within banking. We talk to our clients all the time, whether they're a large corporation in the C-suite, whether they're a family business, a small to mid-sized family business, whether they're a nonprofit, and we talk about succession planning, right? So what are you doing to empower those today to be leaders tomorrow? And I think that's what ELS brings to the table, right? It allows us the opportunity to work with folks within companies who have a passion about an issue in the community, expose them to what's going on in neighborhoods, in the state, in the city, and work with them. And especially when it comes to food insecurity. I mean, you threw out some of the numbers. I mean, we have anywhere between 350 and 400,000 people who are food insecure in Connecticut. About 100,000 of them are children, right? Let that sit with you for a little bit. What we have going on today is things are better. I mean, the numbers aren't as big as they were during the prior 2 years during the pandemic, but they're still elevated from 2019 levels of people who are in need, who are going to food banks and needing assistance, right? So that's higher. Food donations are about level, right? And for anybody who's been to the grocery store, the cost of food is going up. So if you're purchasing food, it's an elevated cost, and there's supply chain issues. So you can't get everything you want, meat being one of those things. So you got the double to triple whammy working right now, and that is the challenge. And it's not some of us who have been around for a long time who are going to solve that issue. It's we need new perspective. We need younger people. We need a lot of different voices engaged in that. So that's part of the reason that I, partner with the United Way and support the this particular, initiative.
Thanks, Joe. Alondre, wanted to know more about your involvement with the ELS case competition, and what are some learnings that you might want to highlight from that experience?
Yeah, thank you. I think the first thing that is something I know is that I identify as an emerging leader, and the support from HSB has been vital for me in the competition in a couple key areas. So the first one is enhancing my participation in real issues in the community. So the awareness around what's actually happening. So there's really two foundational things that we've learned early on. There's people who know that these resources exist, but the stigma that surrounds accessing these resources is at an all-time high. And then there's those people who aren't even aware that all of these resources exist but need them. And so we have to educate and find solutions for those people. And so taking that foundation and then transitioning that into finding a solution to something that has real impact, I think for me personally, that's been the biggest reward of this experience. And then, from a learning perspective, I think there's really two parts. There's the implementation, which I think is key because we were able to go to the grassroots in these communities. We're able to communicate with leaders in the area, understand the community, understand the people that are actually living in these environments, ask them questions. We're able to interview organizations that work with these community partners. And then we're able to focus on developing and implementing a campaign, which as a part of the winning team, we've been able to start doing at this point, with our PSA that we worked on with Comcast that's currently airing, and then working on a community project, which is going to be a mural that's going to be something that people can take pride in when they walk into these areas to access these resources. And so for me, as the chair of 2022, I think really what my focus has been is to say, okay, we have this amazing opportunity and we have these amazing young leaders. How can we bridge the gap between these emerging leaders and opportunity? Because typically the thing that separates those two is experience. We always say you don't have enough experience. And so I look at this ELS case competition as a great way to bridge that gap. And I want to have a part in being able to set the tone for what the future looks like. And so the first way that we did that is to say, for 2022, why not have a steering committee that's full of not experienced professionals, but emerging leaders? Let's build a foundation on having these people actually making a difference, giving them the autonomy to make decisions and own components of this experience that we're going to roll out to people. And then the second part is I challenged the group to say, what's the future of the case competition look like? How are we going to be able to scale this so that we can impact people professionally, but then allow them to go out and follow through on all these amazing resources that they've obtained? So how do we fast forward 5 years and then take the future of the case competition and bring it to today? And so that's been a really great experience. We have a great team, a great steering committee, ready to roll out an amazing experience. And I think one of the keys here is to say participation is key. And we have really two areas that we're participating where we have teams that come from different companies locally, but then we also have those people who maybe don't have a team or company that's able to represent them, but they want to participate. And so we have this community option where individuals can raise their hand and say, hey, I want to be a part of that. And then we're going to take those individuals and put them on a community team that's going to go serve the same purpose. And so I'm really excited about the opportunity. I think there's a lot at stake here. And for me, I think the responsibility of being able to do something, I think has always given me great energy. And I just feel like now is a great time to do a great thing.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Alondre. Congressman Larson, how should we get involved here in the community? What would be your call to action for our emerging leaders and the folks that are viewing this Lunch the Legislator today?
Well, I think both Joe and Alondre have touched on, we need everybody's commitment, but one of the things we're working on in Washington, D.C. is a way to get emerging leaders involved in on a twofold mission of community service, and in return for community service, forgiving your student loan debt or providing you with the wherewithal, the monies to go to college or to further your studies, academic or non-academic, so that you end up as a more productive citizen. But there's no free lunch, and it fits in with kind of our theme when we talk about lunch. But the idea of getting having community service is something that President Kennedy started with the Peace Corps. But when you look at its application, why couldn't we have an application like that for every municipality, every state, every national initiative where people are willing to roll up their sleeves and in a designated way volunteer their service and their efforts, and in return provides them with the kind of education so that everyone benefits. The knowledge of knowing that you're helping somebody out and making your community better, which is donating back to your community, your state, and your nation. And that comes with the thank you of putting you in a position to either for every year of service, getting 2 years of in-state college tuition either paid for or reduced in terms of costs that you have incurred. So that's one of the things that we're going to continue to advocate. And whether you go to college or not, I mean, citizenship in a democratic republic is dependent upon people's involvement and commitment. And while I think it's important to provide incentives, the greatest incentive is knowing the good work that you're doing and the help that you're bringing to a community. And I think people that have been involved in public service in any shape, manner, or form, and I'm not talking about simply elective office, but true public service, being out there and getting involved in your community, is remarkably rewarding in and of itself. But we hope to come up with ways that will provide even greater and more incentives along those lines.
That's great. And I, as a returned Peace Corps volunteer myself 20 years ago, I appreciate the mention of the program. It's what, inspired me to get into the nonprofit sector and start my career with United Way. So I appreciate that. Joe, can you talk more about the ELS, just in terms of how the opportunities around it, can create meaningful impact?
Sure. Look, if you're a part of a company and you want to form a team and get involved in this case competition, like I said, it's a great way to learn more about this region, the city, neighborhoods within the city. And look at Alondre. I mean, I'm so proud of Alondre just presenting here. You people may think that Alondre is really smooth and polished. Some of us who were his judge during the case competition, we didn't even think his team was going to get out of round one. So, but the fact of the matter is they took advice that they were getting from a number of folks who were evaluating each presentation that they had. They got better with each successive round, and they actually won the competition. And the theme still rings in my head that they had La Cucina de Mi Abuela, which is my grandmother's kitchen, which was so perfect, for some of the neighborhoods that they were targeting within Hartford. And I think that kind of knowledge is invaluable for you as part of your company to get involved as a team, even as an individual. If you know folks who are in companies who want to get individually, just raise their hand. We'll put the team together. So I think it's a valuable experience. It was valuable because the first year that I did this was in 2018 or 2019, and we were doing in-person presentations. Everybody had to learn how to present in this format. I mean, believe me, I don't know about you guys, but John and I, we're better, much better in person than we are virtually, but you got to deal with what the technology is present today, and this isn't going away. So I think, it gives, there are a number of subject matter experts you're exposed to. Jason Jakubowski, I believe, is on the line, executive director of Connecticut Food Share. They were, instrumental in helping educate the teams on the, food insecurity, on the subject matter. There are people who are coaching, and presentational skills. So I think there's so much to be gained, so much nourishment out there for each individual to participate in the ELS competition. I highly recommend it.
Thanks, Joe. And Alondre, you have the floor now. How should people take action on ELS?
That's a great question. So I would first recommend, get involved in the 2022 ELS case competition. And how do you do that? I really think there's 3 ways that we can focus on. And it starts with utilizing your time, talent, and treasure. And so when I look at how we can use those in this area, there's participating. So that's using your time and talent, because you're giving of those 2 things as a participant. The second way is to follow along and spread the word. So if you see something, say something. If you see something, share something. That's utilizing both those time and talent also. And then if all of those are exhausted, the last thing you can do is donate. This cause is able to be supported in many different areas, and financially it allows us to implement, to follow through on our commitments to all the great work that these teams do. And so I would recommend that you consider maybe doing all 3, maybe doing one of 3, but something is always better than nothing, and we can always find a way to utilize the great talents that we all bring to the table. So all 3 for me are vital in pushing the mission forward of removing that in from insecurity. I think our goal is to make our community's food secure. And so if we can remove that in, I think we're on our way to making that happen.
And just one more question to Alondre and Joe. If you're to make a pitch to other employers in the region about why this is important to your teams, what would you say?
I'd say you can't afford not to do it. As I said, we talk to companies all the time about succession planning, and this is a perfect way. I mean, John was talking about it. It doesn't have to be, with not-for-profits. It doesn't have. It's just it can be, with your local municipality. Find your passion. Get engaged. And if you don't know what your passion is just yet, this is a perfect opportunity to help you, explore some different avenues that maybe you've never explored before.
Great, thank you. I believe we have a little bit of time left for some questions. If there are any questions from our viewers, for the Congressman or Joe or any of the other panelists, Alondre and myself, can please submit it. If not,
I have a question, Eric.
Yes, go ahead.
This is Mike Golbass. Congressman Larson, thank you for participating today. I think we're lucky to have you, and I appreciate United Way leadership as well for organizing this. And Joe, Alondre, you guys always seem to be available when you're needed. So I really appreciate this panel. But my question, Congressman, relates to the child tax credit. So there was a much more lucrative version of the child tax credit that was introduced by our delegation in Connecticut, and proudly. And that version was, I believe, dragged 55 million children out of poverty. But the more generous version expired. And does that mean that now 55 million children will be added to the ranks of poverty again after we lifted them out?
The Inflation Rescue Plan, which again reinstated the child tax credit. To your point, it was going to lapse, and let me give Rosa DeLauro the credit for that. She's worked on that bill for more than 11 years. heading that up, and it helps to have the chair of the Appropriations Committee heading up that piece of legislation. So, and it did. The child tax credit was extraordinarily helpful to families in this region, and will continue to be a force.
How do you respond though to the Republicans who say that might fuel inflation though, and we're fighting that battle as well?
Well, the Republicans say that inflation was caused by Joe Biden. You know, that the global pandemic and the supply chain issues that have evolved from that, and then of course the war and the Ukraine with Russia and all the issues surrounding energy, oil, gas, food, including wheat and the major harvests for the country, supply chain issues, and in general that Europe was experiencing inflation ahead of the United States. So it's not surprising that not a single Republican voted for the American Rescue Plan. They all took credit for the checks that people were receiving in the mail, including the child tax care credit. And not a single Republican voted for the inflation reauthorization program. So hard to figure out, although my guess is that they thought that as most midterm elections historically tend to favor the party out of power, especially if the party out of power has the president at the same time, that's what they were banking on. But clearly not all Republicans are bad, and certainly many of them would support things like the child tax credit, but have remained aligned in their political opposition to addressing the needs of the country. And clearly the child tax credit was one of those.
The one thing that I'm somewhat proud of as the chair of the advocacy committee, I'm a United Way volunteer, is that we were supporters of the state child tax credit, which I think is a good backdrop. It's only $250 per kid, but I think it was particularly important in light of what was happening with some of the proposed federal legislation. So I really appreciate your support of all of these provisions. But I do have one other question. It's always dangerous to open my mic. But I have one other question for you, and that is, so as the chair of the advocacy committee, we would like to advocate for things that will unite our community around the most important issues. And I'm just wondering, if you were in my shoes as the chair of the advocacy committee, what specific piece of legislation do you think that, we should be writing letters and getting our partners together on and trying to advocate around, unifying the community on a really important issue? What would that issue be for you?
Social Security.
Okay.
Quite simple. It's the nation's #1 insurance program. It's the #1 anti-poverty program for the elderly. And until the passage of the child tax credit, the #1 anti-poverty program for children as well. It helps out more disabled, and specifically more disabled veterans than the VA. It is an insurance program that Congress hasn't enhanced in more than 51 years. Now imagine that. The price of a gallon of milk in 1971 was 72 cents. And needless to say, you're all aware of the problems that we're currently going through in this inflationary period and what the costs have been. It is Congress's responsibility. It's not something the president can do with executive order, or this is something that the Supreme Court can do either, and you won't see that happening. It's specifically the responsibility of Congress, and it hasn't acted to enhance Social Security in more than 51 years. And when you contrast that with what some of the Republicans are proposing, Rick Scott ending Social Security and Medicare in 5 years, the Republican Study Committee saying that we ought to make cuts across the board to Social Security, and people still harbor the notion that we'd be better off privatizing Social Security. You only have to go back to 2008, 2009 and the Great Recession when so many people saw their 401k become a 101k. And to know that during that same period, Social Security never missed a payment, not a pension payment, not a disability payment, not a spousal or a dependent payment was missed, because it is the nation's preeminent insurance program. It's the great safety net in a capitalistic entrepreneurial society that we live in. They work well hand in hand, but when you neglect it for 51 years, that's what creates the great wealth disparity that exists. And it's astounding that more than 3 million of our fellow Americans, mostly women, get below poverty level checks from their government because of the time that they worked, the jobs that they held, the fact that they were caregivers, and the fact that they were receiving far less in wages. Those things need to be addressed.
I appreciate your response, and I think United Way's ALICE study completely supports everything you're saying, with a lot of elderly who, in spite of having the Social Security benefits, are having a hard time affording meat and other more expensive food. I really appreciate all you've done for the state, and I'll give up the mic, but thank you, Congressman.
Well, when you see people, especially elderly people, putting food back on the shelves because they can't afford it, when you see them unable, and even though also in the recent, bill that we passed as well, providing for direct negotiations for prescription drugs, this is what is needed in the nation today. And there's quite a contrast between the two parties and their approach. One believes that all you have to do is provide a tax cut, even though 83% of that tax cut goes to the nation's wealthiest 1%. And hopefully that money will trickle down to the remaining 17% of the nation who may have gotten some benefits out of it, but the disparity again is eye-popping, as opposed to having money go directly to families by way of a child tax care credit, to go to small businesses, to incentivize them, and to ease a lot of the pain that exists within society by making sure that we're helping subsidize the areas that we need to subsidize and provide an opportunity for everybody to succeed.
Thank you. I appreciate your answer.
I believe we have a hand raised, Aaron.
Yes, hi, this is Aaron Knight. Yeah, my question was kind of going back to the case competition. I was wondering if Alondre could speak to kind of the timeline of upcoming events. When are the registration deadlines, or when will the presentations, the actual virtual rounds be taking place?
Yeah, absolutely. Good, great question, Aaron. The first thing is registration for teams is going to close next week. So that's going to be September 17th is the deadline. The case actually will be released to everyone on September 20th. And then the first round of presentations would start on October 18th.
Thank you.
Aaron, if you ask me to remember any more of the key timelines, I can bring them to you smooth.
Time flies. We're back at it again. So good luck to all the teams this year, and I'm sure you're going to do a great job as the chair.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I see Allison with her hand raised.
Allison Esty here from Cigna. I'm also part of the case competition steering committee this year. I wanted to say thank you to the whole panel for taking the time today. The question I had, I know you talked about what took place during COVID with regards to food insecurity, but I'm curious for all the panelists looking forward, what do we see as the biggest issues coming on our radar with regards to food insecurity?
Who wants to take that?
Let's start with the fact that I think that we're not totally out of the woods yet, as we face yet another variant They were anticipating, which is currently working its way through Europe and will be here sometime in the fall. And I think scientifically and medically, there's been a lot of struggles, in terms of what's the right process to follow. But I still think the safe thing and smart thing to do is to make sure that people are vaccinated and boosted and follow the appropriate guidelines where needed. Now, you all know this, that there have been many people who are resolute in terms of, feeling that vaccinations are not something for themselves and have refused to wear masks and et cetera. Yet the facts are the facts. And this is, so the Omicron virus, or this variant, I think yesterday Dr. Fauci was talking about that, and I think this probably makes the most sense, is that we're going to ultimately treat this the same way we treat the flu and get flu shots on a regular basis. That will help from a health standpoint, but it doesn't answer directly. But you can't be in the midst of a pandemic and pretend that it's not there. But it's not your specific question. What do we have to do with with regard to the food shortage is to continue to support the DeLauro legislation, that keeps kids fed, and also looking at, as is the case in Hartford, it's a food desert in North Hartford. It's why we work to make sure that we put up a grocery store in North Hartford so that people actually have access. We can provide all the funding in the world, but if you're in a community and you don't have transportation and there's no grocery store or fresh food in your neighborhood, then you've still got a problem. And this is not just a problem that faces the city of Hartford or cities across the nation, but it also impacts rural countries as well. And I would think that this would be a rallying point for Congress, especially as we go through this next variant, and also with the coming of the holiday seasons, et cetera, and at a time when people usually start to focus on how they can step up and help out the innumerable causes that exist out there to help families in need.
Yep. I second, Allison, is a great question. I second what the Congressman, just laid out. What I'd say is we're in Hunger Action Month, right? So as Alondre had said, donate your time, your talent, and your treasure. You can do it right to Connecticut Food Share. And in full disclosure, I'm a board member of Connecticut Food Share, but I will tell you that they need your engagement. They need everyone's engagement. And why? Because those 2 years we had emergency food distribution, that's done. As the Congressman said, there are other solutions out there that need to be explored, like places where we can place a neighborhood grocery store, and that's going to help Frog Hollow. That may help Parkville, but there's other neighborhoods within the city that still have a need. And even outside the city, there's hunger in every 169 towns in Connecticut, there are people who are hungry, right? So we need to help, figure out some of those solutions and continue to get people. They don't know about the supplemental nutritional program. It's a SNAP. I think Food Shared last year signed up another 2,000 people, for the supplemental nutrition assistance program. They need help with that, right? They need volunteers in order to help continue that. And when we talked about, I keep talking about succession planning, but Food Share partners with 600 partner agencies, smaller food banks in different places. Those 600 agencies aren't created equal. Some of them may be 12 people who are 70 years old, and when they're done, it's done, right? It's over. So we need to find efficiencies within the local distribution, if there are best practices that those groups can share, help them connect, help them get together. And again, Connecticut Food Share is doing all of that. I think, by engaging with them, learning more about the issue, be able to spread the word, all that helps in the long run.
Yeah, the only thing I'd add from what you both have mentioned is really, I think data, when we look at data, it's always from a 30,000-foot view. But typically the story is in the 10,000-foot view. Like what is the real root of why the data is saying what it says? And I think for us, I know one of the things that we did in 2021 was we really looked deep into, what does the 211 site look like? Let me go on this myself and understand the process and how easy it is or how difficult it is, so that we can speak to that when we're going to people and saying, hey, here's something that's holding back people from accessing these resources. I think for me, the future of this is really the education of self, and then going out and being curious enough to ask other people about their opinions. Because again, I think there's such a gap in understanding. And I think we take a lot of our thoughts and their opinions, but we don't really focus on the facts. The facts are the stories that we're all seeing, that this is a real concern. And so I just like to see us go back to 10,000 feet and really dig into like the things that we're currently doing, to Joe's point, and figure out how we can be more efficient with what we're currently doing, and then figure out a way to take those things and enhance them.
Thanks, Alondre. And I just had a closing thought that, United Way has been around for nearly 100 years. We have, we're approaching our centennial in 2024. And what I think about all of the issues that this United Way has been involved in over the years, in the nation recovering from wars and a pandemic, the power of United Way, the relevancy of United Way is uniting the public and private sector. And that is to create collective impact. And so I think today is a perfect demonstration of that. We have amazing leadership from both sectors that we, appreciate greatly. And then, volunteers like Michael, who's not shy, and our advocacy committee chair, to really help us think about how we can pave the way for the future. So I do want to thank all the panelists today, Congressman Larson, Joe Gianni, Alondre Rush. I also want to thank our sponsors, HSB, Comcast, our media implementation sponsor, Cigna, Connecticut, People's Bank, HYPE, and the UConn School of Public Policy. And I also want to give you all a personal invitation to contact me directly. And I think my email will be put in the chat. Feel free to contact me directly about getting involved with United Way, or any thoughts about today's conversation. And for the local media who joined us today for this conversation, if you have specific questions, there are also contacts that are listed in the media advisory after this event concludes. Thank you all. Have a wonderful afternoon.